Welcome to ESPC Focus interview with Prof. Jess. Today, our discussion will be focusing on issues on privacy. And with us today are two qualified panelists on this subject. Our first panelist is Ms. Philippa Van Wanrooy from Australia. She is the founder and director of Cyber Life Skills. Cyber Life Skills is an organization that provides a holistic approach to cyber learning and development. Welcome to the show, Ms. Philippa Van.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Our second panelist is Associate Professor Dr. Sony Zulhuda from International Islamic University of Malaysia, IIUM. He reads and writes on issues of cyber law, information governance, information security, and personal data protection. Dr. Sony obtained his PhD in information security law in 2010, and he is a 2008 Web Science Summer Doctoral Fellow from University of Oxford, UK, and a two-time Fellows of the US-based ICANN, Fellow Research for Cyber Stewards Network at Citizen Lab, University of Toronto, Canada, and a member of Research Alliance for Data Governance and Cybersecurity, DGCS Alliance, hosted in Beijing, China, among others. Welcome to the show, Prof. Dr. Sony Zulhuda.
Thank you, Prof. Jess. Thank you for having me.
Let's go to the first question that I would like to address to Ms. Philippa. A very basic question that I think is very fundamental to all of us here. What do you mean, or what do we mean by privacy and security? Perhaps you can describe this in your words, in your own understanding.
So I think privacy is a strategy for shielding resources, assets, our families, individuals, especially children from predators, but also from cyber criminals. Privacy is, it's kind of a bit of a loaded word in this day and age, especially, with so much surveillance and our information being such a commodity these days. So, yeah, I would say privacy is more about being able to safeguard both virtually and physically your assets.
Can you touch a bit on the rights of privacy to humans?
Well, we're all entitled to privacy. Unfortunately, in this day and age, we kind of gave privacy away when we became so enamored with the mobile phone or the smartphone. It's really difficult now, as most of us actually have to provide information, identifying information for certain services that we use. It's certainly coming down the pipeline with, the digital or the COVID passports and things like that. So it is a really interesting space to be in, talking about privacy by design. A lot of us demand privacy, but we're also using a number of platforms. One of them, obviously, Facebook is huge. We've got things like LinkedIn that we have to, if we don't use or don't partake in those kind of platforms, we can't actually achieve, economic or jobs or livelihoods around those things. Yeah, look, personal information is always going to be a commodity and privacy, but how we as individuals handle that is also going to be quite different of how corporations or businesses and government handle our data as well around and also handle privacy.
Let me go to the next panelist, Dr. Sony. Do you believe privacy exists in the digital world?
As a proponent of privacy, I believe privacy is there and should be there in the digital world, because it is so much of an inherent right people cannot live without. People say privacy is a right, so you can always waive your rights and continue with life. But I would argue that living without privacy is a very difficult life. And we start to feel actually when it comes to digital life, where we start to lose our control of our own privacy. So if you ask me whether it is there, yes, but of course there's a huge of challenging, circumstances, facing the privacy and how we hold the right to privacy in our life today.
I'm one of the most private people I know amongst my friends. I don't use a lot of social media, yet, I've been forced to give certain things away to achieve certain things in my life. And absolutely, privacy is a human right. Although, the thing is, people don't quite understand that when they are using particular things, whether they're using search engines or whatever, that's continually affecting their private lives, because everything's being collected.
In Malaysia, while we have been talking about privacy, yet the situation is not very ideal. We have lots of issues in Malaysia, but if I were to choose the top 3 issues of privacy, number 1 is that there is some considerable uncertainty when it comes to the legal protection to right to privacy. Though we already have cases handled by court, but there is no firm decision as to what extent someone can get a redress when when their privacy is being intruded. But we can have another point on this, but yet the situation is not very ideal, even though our law is improving on that. Another issue is when it comes to data privacy. Um, we do have tremendous development in the form of the legislation of Personal Data Protection Act, which is of course a part of privacy issues, because privacy, you have body privacy, communications privacy, territorial privacy, as well as data privacy. So at least for this data privacy, we have this comprehensive law. But the problem, there are few problems in this law, and among others, the biggest one would be the fact that this law doesn't apply to personal data processed by governments, because this is a policy taken by our policymakers, by governments in the past. But because that is not an ideal situation, that our data, which is processed in the governments and by government agencies, are not given afforded protection as our data in a private sector. So somehow that creates a double standards, double situations, which will become a problem in near future. And then the third issue that I'd like to highlight is when it comes to the use of our identity cards. In Malaysia, everyone has identity cards. They call it My Card, in which they have a fundamental personal information. The problem is in Malaysia, there is an overuse of this ID card. For example, when you want to go to certain premises, they will ask your ID card. Some of them will take the picture of it. Some others will photocopy your ID card. Some others will even retain your card until you exit the premise. So this is, I would say, still very rampant in our country, in Malaysia, but I don't think it is a correct way of using our My Card. So this is only one of the situation where it has been overused, to the extent that it is too much now, and it has to stop.
Do people have because we don't have the Australia card at the moment. People are certainly have been talking about it for a while. But you, as an individual with your card, can you actually refuse them? Like if they want to take a photocopy, can you then ask, how safely are they going to keep that information?
That is, of course, there is a difference between what you should do and what you have been doing. That is also related to the level of our awareness and understanding. Even though we have enough laws and guidelines saying that people should not simply or easily overuse and then show or share their ID cards at any time. But yet people do not have that understanding and thinking that they are obliged when they are asked to do that, they are obliged, and even some of them, they are happy to do that. So we have an issue here that people need to be informed that this is not correct, it is not necessary, it can be excessive, and it is against some law.
Let me follow up with your question now. Then now I think there is also a new trend. So now they don't ask for your my card, your national ID card. They will ask for your driving license instead of like putting like a now your my card. Can you pass us your driving license before you get to the premise and collect back when you are going outside the premise? So,
Really?
so how is that in the position of the law?
Yeah, for some people, they thought it is safer because using driving license is not governed by the same law which governs the use of ID cards. This ID card is to some extent governed by this national registration law, which does not include driving license. However, this is not true, because the reality is as long as it is an information related to you individually, then it is an access to yourself. So be it an IC, an ID card, be it a driving license, or even your school certificates, they all serve the same purpose to identify you. And therefore, for all these practices, they cannot be overused. We are not only talking about the my card, right? So the principle is that identification will have to be done legally and lawfully. It's either by the basis of consent or the basis of necessity or contract. So beyond that, it should not be allowed to be overused. And it will amount to an excessive use of personal information. And that is, again, will be against the law. Some laws, and we are talking especially about personal data protection law in Malaysia.
Philippa, I have a question for you now. What are the threats to privacy in Australia? So in Malaysia, you have heard about identity card overuse. And then what about Australia?
Well, certainly, I'll give you an example. People that rent, that go and rent houses here, or we've had quite an issue around people finding rentals and those kind of things. So what they're asking people to do now is to apply online. So apply via a real estate portal and then supply copies, so scans or photocopies of your driver's license, your passport, your financial details, and put them in. You haven't even got the house yet. This is just the application to get the house. Now, I was in a position not so long ago looking for a house, and kind of went through go online and do this. So me being probably security obsessed, kind of went through and went to the back, and it was actually owned by a company out of the US, which was known for one of the largest data breaches ever in 2017. So all that information, identifying information, so basically you're handing it to them on silver platter, it's all going offshore. It's not staying within your country. So if you're giving away your identity documents and your financial documents, they can do with it whatever they'd like to do with it. They can also, commit fraud, set up bank accounts, do all kinds of things using your identity documents. So there's a few issues around that. I know here, unless it's a government official or the police or someone like that, you are not bound to actually show your driver's license. And certainly if you go to a place and they ask for a copy of it, you can just say, no, I will show you my passport or my driver's license, and you can verify it here and there on the spot. But a lot of people don't know that. They just don't know the law, or know that they can just say, no, you can look at it, you can verify it, and then you can sign off on it. Your identity is your most valuable thing, not just of our age group, but also of the children coming through. And we're seeing this more and more in the US. They're suggesting that you even freeze their credit because the bad guys are actually taking over people's identities, because it's out there for all and sundry to do with what they wish.
Let's take a break. And when we come back, we will continue with more interesting questions regarding privacy. Do you have a similar unifying identity card in Australia, or you do not have?
No, we don't. There's been discussions back around that again. Obviously, where we're heading with the COVID passport and those kind of things are probably going to head that way. I think, yes, we've only really got the passport and our driver's license to prove our identification. Obviously, they're talking about certain apps that we can use on our phone.
Dr. Sonny, can you explain the new law, international law or European law called GDPR, and then how much of it different from PDPA, and what is the repercussion of not complying to GDPR or not harmonizing the PDPA towards the international law? Can you describe a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Jess. GDPR, European General Data Protection Regulations, is replacing the old directive in 1995. So GDPR was officially completed in 2016, but was only enforced in 2018. This was, of course, under the European Community, European Union. And it is meant to be for European residents, but however, it also has some clauses which would also affect extraterritorial jurisdictions, including Malaysia, especially if people in Malaysia actually processing the data of the European residents in Malaysia and offering services to them. So that is why the GDPR, despite that it is European centric, but actually it reshapes the privacy regulations in the world. And it has come up with lots of new norms, which are not necessarily found in the Malaysian Personal Data Protection Act 2010. And I believe Malaysian PDPA will have to consider, synchronizing the law into those new norms, not because we just want to follow what is trending from the GDPR, but in my opinion, it is because this data privacy is really changing and moving very quickly. And yes, lots of new norms that are being brought by the GDPR will have to be will need to be adopted in Malaysia. And among others, one of the important approach used by the GDPR is because it uses the risk-based approach. It stresses very much importance on the risk-based approach. So the more the risk is, then the more measures you have to put in order to protect personal data. So among others, the principle of privacy impact assessments, the PIA, as well as privacy by design. It was mentioned by Philippa earlier, privacy by default. These are among those new norms which impose that everyone, especially data users, before you apply or execute any program, any business, any transactions, which may bring some risk in terms of data privacy of your customers or of your employees, then you will have to consider the measures to minimize those risks from the very beginning. So this is what we call as privacy by design, as well as privacy impact assessment. Then also there is new norm called data breach notifications. And this is very important as well in security perspective. You don't wait until problem becomes so obvious to you. You have to move right away the moment you see there is a chance of data being compromised. For example, one of the employees reported to the management that he lost his laptop or his mobile phone during commuting, during transport, in which there is a bulk of personal data of consumers. So this is the only fact that you know, and you have to take some measures. If you consider there is a risk of data being breached, then you will have to notify some people. And according to this new law, there are at least two people that you have to notify. Number one, you notify the data subjects, those people whose data may be breached or may be compromised. You don't have to wait until there is an actual breach of data. So the principle of data breach notification, the moment you see there is an incident that you reasonably consider there is a risk of breach, then you report, you inform and notify the data subjects, as well as reporting to the authority. This is, of course, not existent in our PDPA. And I believe this is one way to reduce, to minimize the breach of data. You have all this in terms of security. You have preventive, responsive, and the other one.
Reactive.
Reactive. So we cannot react until after it happens, because it will be too late. One of the biggest data breach incident in Malaysia, which involved 46 million data of telecommunication subscribers in Malaysia. It was known after some people informed that they are selling this data in the internet. Now, then what happened was actually the breach itself already happened a few years back. So what to do? I mean, things are already dead, it's already in the internet. What can you do in order to prevent? So this data breach notification is very important, and GDPR is introducing, or rather pushing this to be the next norm in data regulation. And I think for the good thing about PDPA, our PDPA in Malaysia, is that actually some initiatives is ongoing. Back in early 2020, the Office of the Personal Data Protection Commissioner has come up with some review, a draft review for the law, and asking feedback from public. And among others, within that review draft is about data breach notification. That is one way to go, inshallah. We will have a better law, hopefully, if this review is completed.
Thank you, Dr. Sony, for the explanation. We are very limited time now. I just want to go back to Philippa. Do you have a GDPR equivalent in Australia?
We do. We have what we call the Privacy Act, 1988 Privacy Act. We also do have a mandatory data breach notifications. But, I agree with Dr. Sunny, unless some of these organizations or organizations that hold, data gold like identity information or other government institutions or those kind of things actually do perhaps security assessments, on the dark web to see if the data has been taken and is for sale. It can be years before people know that their information has been leaked, and the damage could have been done, because we know everything that we have is on our mobile phones. I mean, they're mini computers now. We're doing everything on smartphones. I do a lot on my laptop, but that's your life and your livelihood. So that he lost, this is what's happening. It's going back to old school, and people are losing work laptops and work phones, and it's got a lot of private and confidential information on that, as well as business IP and those kind of things. So yes, we do have mandatory data breach notification, but obviously if the company doesn't know that they've been breached in the first place, and then what happens to the individual or the user? Do they have any recourse? Look, I don't really know. Sometimes, in situations there might be a class action, but it's kind of, they do just shrug their shoulders and they're like, okay, oh well, let's move on. So, I do hope things start to change a little bit more, and people are waking up at what they can actually lose. It's not just, by losing privacy and identification, those kind of things, they're actually risking reputation, regulatory, financial. They have financial risks and all those kind of things that are going to shape their future.
Dr. Sony, one last wish or one last word from your side with regard to the future of privacy in Malaysia.
Yeah, this is we are in the phase of early development of privacy law and privacy protection, and we need to keep on educating people about right to privacy, what kind of rights they have, and also on the other side, for those industries or businesses who process data, we must tell them, look, this data protection law is not about banning or prohibiting the use of personal information, because we believe, I do believe, that the use of personal data is a very important backbone in our digital economy, without which we cannot move forward. So we just need to change some norms, and making things fairer. Yes, you still can continue using and processing personal data, but you have to do it now fairly and lawfully, and considering the rights of people. It is not totally your property. Whenever you collect data, there's always some rights of those people, of individuals that will inherently follow with those personal information.
Thank you very much, and
Thank you.
and we are grateful for your participation. In conclusion, digital privacy is a very important subject to be discussed, and it directly affected individuals as well as businesses, and a lot more to be done in this area. Therefore, ESPC will continue with more programs of this nature to discuss about the challenges and the issues to be addressed in privacy, especially in digital privacy. Last but not least, if you have any feedback, suggestion, or question, do email me at the email address shown to you. With that, once again, thank you very much. Stay safe and stay healthy.